Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, December 17th, 2025. Pepe Escobar, December 18th, 2025. Pepe Escobar joins us now. Pepe, where are you now? You're still in Italy?
Yes, I am in Sicily, Judge, and all of you, our audience, not very far from Sigonella, which is one of the top NATO bases in Europe, in the most beautiful Baroque palace in Europe, in fact.
Wow.
I cannot give you details, but this place is a
I'm
late
sorry
18th
that NATO is there, but I'm happy that you are there, and thank you very much for joining us. I do want to talk to you about stealing Russian bank deposits. But before we get there, what is the attitude of the international community, economic and foreign policy, to the seizure of an oil tanker by the American government with 2 million barrels of oil in it? This is an act of piracy. And now the blockade of Venezuela. What is their concern about the economy, the oil market, and war?
Well, Judge, I can tell you the reaction from NATO staff, where I have been for the past 3 weeks or so, everywhere across Italy. Mainstream media, they ignore the story completely. We only hear from alternative Telegram channels, for instance, or academics that are basically marginalized by the system. And there's still a lot of critical thinking in Italy, of course, culturally, historically, because Italian universities used to be fabulous until a few years ago when they all became woke, including the great University of Bologna, including the University of Napoli as well. But on TV channels and on mainstream newspapers, forget it. They don't. This simply does not exist because it contradicts the narrative that Venezuela and Maduro are autocracies. They are allied with Iran. They are allied with Russia. They have support from China. So nothing can deviate from the mainstream.
But they can't change the fact that 2 + 2 = 4. And if you take one of those twos out, you're not going to get 4. I'm being a little silly, suggesting that the removal of 2 million barrels of oil from the market and the stifling of the movement, the prevention of the movement of all future barrels of oil, destined for Cuba, destined for Iran, destined for China, is obviously going to have an effect, and they should be concerned about it. Are they not? I was on, and forgive me for the double and triple question, I was on 2 Russian television stations this morning, which was dinner time, Russian time. Both were both anchors, very, very concerned about what we're talking about now.
Absolutely. But Judge, don't forget that NATO stand as a whole and the European Union, the European Commission, the European Parliament, they never said a word of the fact that they removed themselves from cheap Russian energy. So, right. So 2 million barrels from Venezuela compared to it, But it's the alternative dystopian reality that the political elites live in across NATO stan is beyond mind-boggling. We have one example after another. This week at least, we had a sort of warning coming mainly from Orban in Hungary, but some other EU states, including Italy, the Meloni government, basically telling the European Commission, look, if you're going to steal these Russian assets, we're against it. We had, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7 EU nations against it. This is enormous compared to a few months ago, because at least they're listening to their economists. And at least they're listening to people like Jeffrey Sachs or Michael Hudson, who are saying, look, if you do this, that's the collapse of international trust on the European project and on the euro as a currency as well.
What about Trump's murder of people in speedboats. It's now up to 99 people killed.
Mm-hmm.
Is there concern
No.
in Europe about this? No concern in Europe about this?
It's very hard to explain to our audience that is not based in Europe how remote from real life across the global south and the global majority, be it in Latin America, be it in Southeast Asia, even considering West Asia. For instance, I saw banners from Firenze to Napoli to Palermo, free Palestine. I was arriving at the port of Palermo today by the Maritime Silk Road, let's put it this way. I took the ferry from Napoli to Palermo. The first thing you see when you arrive at Palermo port is an enormous free Palestine in white written on the walls of the port. So public opinion across Italy, and especially working class opinion, port workers, for instance, they know exactly what's going on around the world, in absolute contrast with, of course, governments, nation-state governments, and everybody under we can say the Brussels yoke.
Now, if
remember the yoke on Russia,
if you held up a sign on the Columbia University campus in New York City, not far from where I am now, that said "Free Palestine," or if you held up a sign in front of a statue of Winston Churchill in London that said "Free Palestine," you could get arrested in both places.
You could get arrested, yes. And very important, Judge, please, I would like to remind you and our audience, Jacques Beau, who lives in Switzerland, extensive military background, first-class analyst, and Xavier Moreau, French, same thing, extensive military background, fabulous analysts. They have both been sanctioned by the European Commissions because they are being regarded as Russian Putinista agents. Jacques Beau cannot leave Switzerland. He could be arrested anywhere. He's a Swiss citizen. He lives in Switzerland. He's blockaded, and they confiscated his bank accounts. So
who confiscated his bank account?
The European Commission, Judge.
Without any due process.
Without any due process. This is an order that came straight from the office of that batshit crazy Estonian who poses as foreign policy chief of the European Union.
Yeah.
Well, I prefer not even to name her.
Yeah, I have a dear friend who's a professor of political philosophy at the University of Milan, and very much one of us, who was in grad school with her. He told me she was the dumbest person in the class. They almost fell over when they found out where her political career has taken her. But without getting personal,
we just need to look at her to see how dumb she is.
Yeah, but does she have the authority to steal somebody or freeze somebody's bank account in Switzerland of all places?
She does not, and obviously they're going to go against her. Swiss lawyers are already preparing a case, and in the case of Xavier lives basically in Russia. He commutes to France. He has family in France, and they're going after the European Commission big time, and a lot of independent lawyers across Europe
and won't the Swiss government protect him?
Good question. We still don't know. I assume the Swiss government should protect him, but for the moment we don't have any official word.
Well, if you know him, Chris has been trying to reach him to ask him to come on with us. I don't know if that'll happen before Christmas.
Judge, very important, Judge. If he gives an interview to your show, the Europeans could go after the show itself. So be very, very careful. This has to be clear, because I was told yesterday that if Jacques Beau or Xavier Moreau are interviewed by anybody, they will go after these channels. So please make sure that you're not in danger. The show is not in danger.
Wow. This is thuggery like Stalin would envy. Trump claimed last night that it's hard to say this with a straight face. Yes. Venezuela stole U.S. land and stole U.S. oil.
Land.
Yeah, does anybody know what the hell he's talking about?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, apparently not.
Does
Well,
he
here,
know? Does he know what he's
does he know
talking?
what he's talking about? Probably not.
Well,
Well, the problem is, Judge, when you are inside NATO stand, people are consumed on one end by how difficult life is for average Europeans anywhere you are, in any nation state you are. And at the same time, anger, but still not distilled politically. I was having this conversation with scholars and academics in Napoli yesterday. Fabulous people, all of them marginalized, including in their own universities. And they're saying, look, if we don't have a grassroots movement in the West, starting in cities with a tradition of progressive thinking, like Bologna, like Napoli, for instance, and then you coordinate nationally, and then you have an European-wide progressive movement, nothing's going to change. And for the moment, everything is so fragmented, and there's no political unity, even inside nation states, not to mention across Europe. So you have these explosions of anger like we had today in Brussels. Agricultural workers just setting fire to tires in front of the European Parliament in Brussels today. Completely
wow.
crazy, but no, not organized, just manifesting their anger, their fear and their anger. And this was particularly against the EU-Mercosur agreement. So this is a geoeconomic agreement which basically benefits big corporations in Europe, to the detriment of small agricultural producers all across Europe. But they are not organized politically. That's the problem. Setting fire to tires, okay, but you need a political movement to organize your anger.
What is the status of the efforts to steal the 300 billion from the Belgian banks? Can the Belgian prime minister alone, and he seems very steadfast in this. I don't know his politics, but on this, he understands property rights. He also understands banking laws. Can the Belgian prime minister alone stop this, or will those crazy women, Callas and van der Leyen, be able to overcome his opposition?
He managed, Judge, incredible as it might seem, he managed during the past few days to actually stop the plan. This plan was supposed to be discussed today, Thursday, in Brussels. It was, between commas, postponed because now they are trying to go for a plan B, which is basically to set up a fund confiscating basically taxes paid by European taxpayers all over to send it to Ukraine. It's not as good as 210 billion or so euros of Russian assets, but they apparently for the moment they understood that if they did that, that would be the end of the EU as a viable investment place and the euro as a currency. But they will be back. And this plan of basically setting up this fund, basically confiscating people's taxes, the future for this plan is bleak, to say the least. But at least now there is a conversation, even if not on mainstream media, about the consequences of stealing Russian assets. And the Russians have been very forceful this past few days. Sorry. Basically, they said, look, we have around 200 billion euros of EU assets, different EU assets here in Russia. So it is going to be reciprocal. Not to mention that the trust in the European financial system and in the euro would collapse completely. But these people never give up, like they never give up on the forever wars.
Right.
Even if they are totally marginalized by the Russian-US negotiations.
2 days ago, Chancellor Merz of Germany in Berlin, in the presence of Prime Minister Starmer, President Macron, I don't know if crazy van der Leyen was there, but the two American negotiators, Witkoff and Kushner, were there,
Yes.
stated that there is a deal on the table whereby the Ukrainians can keep an 800,000 man army. The U.S. will provide intel. European troops will aid the army in providing security, and the Russian border, 150 miles into Russia, will be demilitarized. Now, this is absolutely absurd, of course.
Totally absurd, and the Russians would never allow it.
Here is the point that I want to make with you. The two Americans sat there and didn't say a peep, as if they were consenting.
As if they were consenting.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we come back to the problem of how much background Witkoff, not to mention Kushner, how much do they know since before Maidan in 2014 and from Maidan to the SMO in 2022 and afterwards, and the situation on the battlefields now. Apparently, they don't know much about that. Not to mention, they don't listen to Ushakov and Lavrov, who are the official Russian negotiators for Ukraine. Kirill Dmitriev is a non-official parallel channel. He's not officially entitled to conduct any negotiation at the highest level and on a decision-making level. Forget it.
Do the Russians consider these two real estate agents, Witkoff and Kushner, to be official representatives of the president?
Yes, because they the way it's seen by Putin and by the Security Council in Moscow is that they are speaking on behalf of Trump, whatever their status. So that's a important peculiarity. That doesn't mean that Putin and the Security Council trust what they're saying. and the fact that they don't know the fine print concerning the proxy war in Ukraine. Very important, Judge. Tomorrow is Putin's Q&A. More than 1 million questions have been submitted. So expect Putin to talk at least 4 or 5 hours tomorrow, Friday, including, of course, the negotiations with Witkoff, Kushner, etc. So tomorrow we're going to have from Putin himself probably his, I would say, transparent opinion on what's really going on backstage.
Let me play for you something that he said just yesterday, which is fascinating. Chris, number 17.
As for the United States behavior, including in the...
Everyone universally believed and thought that they would utterly destroy and completely break up the vast nation of Russia in a very short period of time, expecting a swift and decisive outcome. And the European political lackeys immediately joined in this work of the previous American administration, hoping to profit from the collapse of our country to take back for themselves something that had been lost in previous historical periods and try to take revenge. As has now become abundantly clear to everyone, in recent times all these numerous attempts and all these profoundly destructive plans against Russia have completely and utterly failed, without exception.
Your thoughts, Pepe?
By the way, he translated from Russian, he actually said piglets. It's the first time, yes, it's the first time, Judge, that I see Putin being so rash on Europe. Before he was calling them, until a few days ago, he was always calling them our former partners or the European.
So the official translation says political lackeys, but you're telling us he actually used the Russian word for a little pig, in English, piglet.
Absolutely. Yes, piglets. Wow. So this means that he's lost his patience with I called a few weeks ago the European matryoshka of stupidity and irrelevance, in fact, because they're not even sitting at a table. And now the Russians are really fed up all the way to the presidency, especially because on the ground, they see, it's crazy. When you have the most important diplomat on the planet, Sergei Lavrov, actually saying it week after week. The war in Ukraine will be decided in the battlefield. This means that they already lost their patience. And they're not betting a lot, not to mention the house, on these, I would say, this extended kabuki with the Americans.
Wow. What do you think is next? I mean, do the Russian people have patience for the slow, methodical pace of the war?
It's an excellent question, Judge. It's an excellent question. And I'm sure the Security Council thinks about that every day. For the moment, yes. But they know that the breaking point could be the first semester of 2026. There's needs, people will start claiming for a definitive resolution until summer next year, especially because they see the negotiations, they see the rumors, they see the advances on the battlefield. They see that, very, very important. People know that the Americans are still providing intel to Kiev for attacks inside the Russian Federation, including attacks against Russian ships in Novorossiysk. This is very, very, very serious. So this is not that the Americans are on a hands-off position at the moment. On the contrary. So the way what Putin himself qualifies now the criminal organization, his own qualification of those people in Kiev. So the Russians are getting ready for something maybe more drastic within the next 6 months. And public opinion wants it. And this is something that probably we're going to see tomorrow, Judge, once again, in the Putin Q&A. There are going to be a lot of questions about, okay, when is this war going to end? Big problem for people who live in Moscow and St. Petersburg is that the war is too far away. You don't feel the war when you are in Moscow or in St. Petersburg. You feel it in smaller cities, in smaller provinces where they are actually sending soldiers to the battlefield. That's another story. And of course, when you get closer to Donbass or to the southeast of Russia. But in Moscow and St. Petersburg, this war is so far away, it could be in Asia.
Will the Kremlin do anything if Trump attacks Venezuela?
Wow. That's the 600 trillion question, Judge. We don't, nobody knows. And not only Russia, Iran, and China. Venezuela is getting different levels of support from these three top BRICS nations. Very, very important. We can say for sure that the rest of South America won't do anything, including Brazil, much to my disgust. But that's realpolitik in South America. But Russia, Putin himself already gave, I would say, indirect messages to the Americans that think twice before setting up your new Vietnam in Venezuela. And the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Relations have been very, very strict on respect of sovereignty and respect of Venezuelan sovereignty and borders. That's not enough so far. So the response will have to be militarily from the point of view of Venezuela, with the weapons that they have that were provided by Russia, and some that we still don't know about by China itself.
Last question, oil. China buys 75 to 80% of its oil from Venezuela. If those ships can't make it to the Panama Canal, then the ships are not going to make it to mainland China or to any Chinese ship ready to receive the oil in the Panama Canal. What will China do?
Exactly, because, well, Venezuela is not one of the top providers of oil to China, unlike the Persian Gulf monarchies and unlike Iran as well. So this very Chinese calculation of how to be forceful within the scope of their new active foreign policy. It used to be passive until a year or 2 years ago, not anymore. But how to respond without frontally antagonizing the empire. If there is a civilization state that is capable of pulling that off, it's China. So we can see that they will find the right balance between a strong response, but not frontally against the US. You still don't know how, the modalities, right? The Russians, they have been slightly more, I would say, rash in their warnings against the Trump administration. But the craziest thing in the whole equation is the absolutely irrational Trump move towards isolating, blockading, harassing, threatening, and even threatening war against Venezuela. So the motivations behind it, there is, I would say, a psychological element on top of all the so-called geopolitical calculations by the Trump administration that escapes everybody. It's becoming an obsession from Trump's point of view. And this is very, very dangerous. There is a factor that I think none of us have already touched. There's something deeper in this obsession with Venezuela. Not only in terms of a declining empire that needs natural resources. Okay, we tried with Greenland, we tried with Canada, but Venezuela, all that oil is over there for the taking. So they fabricate a reason to go there and take the oil. But it goes way beyond that. And I think it's directly linked to enforcing the new national security strategy in practice, in a theater in Latin America, the empire telling all the vassals, look, we are back, this is our backyard, and we do what we want the way we want it. And that's very, very dangerous geopolitically.
Pepe Escobar, thank you, my dear friend. We probably won't see each other until after the first of the year.
Yes.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to you. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, my dear friend. Stay safe. Stay
Merry
well.
Christmas. Happy New Year, Judge, and all the best from Italian NATO stan.
Thank you. God bless you, my friend. All the best. Pep. Coming up at 2 o'clock on all of this, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, and at 3 o'clock on all of this, Professor John Mearsheimer, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.